Ever considered the consequences of leaving your estate planning unplanned? I'm Mark Wyld. Wyld Money starts now. Your wealth creation plan, funnily enough, is only as good as your contingency plan. So to give me more information on this, I'm joined by Melissa Patterson from SLF Lawyers. Thank you so much for coming in and taking time out of your busy schedule. Anytime. So why is it, given how important estate planning is, why is it that people just don't put an emphasis on this really important part of their life?
It's really bizarre, and I think it's common at all age groups. So I'm one of those annoying lawyers and annoying friends. I'm always like, guys, you've got to get your will done. You need to get your powers of attorney. But I think there's that mortality aspect of it. No one wants to think about it. You know, you don't want to imagine not being here and having your kids without parents. And I think people get really stuck in that, and they find it hard to progress.
As far as the reason why, they don't do it. I mean, it is hard to think about. I mean, when I talk to a client about their contingency plan or insurance funding off the estate plan, it is one of the most important parts of planning, but people typically don't want to pay as much attention to it as they would like to. They more focus on the property investing or share investing or lowering their tax and stuff like that. So when it comes to not planning adequately, just take me through some horror stories. So what are the consequences of not getting this right?
I mean, I think the biggest issue is that often when something does happen, it's unexpected, and then you're there and you're left without a will. So the whole aspect of, I don't want to make my will because I'm finding this a really confronting process, actually makes it 10 times worse for your partner or whoever you're leaving behind, because then they're there without a will. You're grieving in that process as well, and then you're sitting there and you're not able to distribute that person's assets as per their wishes. You're there under the laws of intestacy, and there's a lot of issues with that, as I know that you're well aware of. But just in terms of who then is eligible for the estate, then you have people coming out having fights over who's going to be made the administrator. You really just lose all control. So it's one of those things that I say to my clients, you know, grab a bottle of wine, have a glass of red, sit there with your questionnaire and go through it together, get it sorted now so you're not having issues later.
Even if it's quite vanilla, the relationship, and it's very clear on, you know, I guess what someone's intention is with their estate and their assets, but even off the most vanilla of circumstances, if someone thinks they're vanilla, I don't need an estate plan, I don't need a fancy lawyer to do all this for me. Even then, if it's not done or if it's not executed correctly, it can still take your loved ones over 12 months just to get any financial benefit from your estate. Whereas if you have it done, it's a lot faster, right?
It is a lot faster, and I think that's the issue as well. When if you don't have the will, you need to then go through that letters of administration process, and then, like I said before, there could be maybe you and me might come out of the woodwork and be like, well, no, I want to be administrator of this estate. So then you're losing a 6-month delay there. Obviously, when people pass away, this isn't really common knowledge, but bank accounts get frozen. So you don't have access. You're not sitting there like, oh, hey, I've got 100K in this account that I can use. They're frozen. So there really is that need to push forward and to get the estate distributed. So, I mean, it's just really simple. You get your will done.
Yeah, right. So so you mentioned passing away. So is that also applicable to disablement as well? If someone pretty much doesn't sound great, a vegetable for the rest of their life?
So that's power of attorney document. So power of attorney is used for when you're alive, and then when you pass away, your will comes into play. So with the power of attorney, there's a medical power of attorney, and then there's a financial power of attorney. So obviously we package that up when we do our wills, but so you've covered every aspect.
Right, okay. So estate planning, you know, it sounds as though everyone should get it done, but being a lawyer, I mean, obviously, you were just saying to me before off air that you have over 100 people in your company now. So what are some other risks that are presented to people that they might have been aware of when they're quite ambitious, they want to invest in the property, use trust, build wealth for them and their families and for generations to come? What are some other risks that you see that people just aren't safeguarding against enough?
Probably, and quite sadly, the biggest issue that we're seeing are people who aren't, I guess, protecting themselves by way of insurance.
Okay.
So whether it's, an income protection or a TPD insurance, and again, something you don't want to think about. You don't want to ever think that you don't have the ability to work. And I have a client at the moment who was super healthy, like the, absolute, never smoked, never drank, bike rider, just fit as a fiddle. And then on his 50th birthday was diagnosed with stage 4 stomach cancer. And he had just cancelled all of his insurances because the premiums had risen so much.
Right.
So he would have been eligible for the income protection. He would have gotten a lump sum payment as well because he has an illness that isn't curable. And it's made a really big impact on the family.
So what's the psychology of these people that A, don't get adequate estate planning, but B, don't get the insurance funding behind it? What's their train of thought? I mean, obviously, assuming that they have loved ones to take care of, they have kids that are still want to send to potentially private schools, and if their income stops or they're not here anymore, all of that goes away, which is, the life that they plan for these people. So what's the psychology on why someone wouldn't spend a couple of days just really going into depth with the adequate lawyer to get this part of this life sorted?
I really think it just comes back down to they don't want to acknowledge that it would happen to them.
Okay.
I think as well. Yeah, I really do.
So how do we get over that stigma?
I think what I do personally is if I'm finding a client is really struggling with, I guess, the structure of providing instructions for estate planning, because with estate planning, it can feel maybe a little bit impersonal in terms of here's a questionnaire, go away and fill it in. So I think it's really obvious if a client's struggling like that. So get them in, have the chat, and you'll always find out there'll be a reason. So a recent client, the problem that was really preventing them from finalising their will was that they didn't have anyone that they could appoint as a guardian for their young children. And they were really struggling. And this was just, parents aren't here anymore. Siblings are in another state.
Can they engage the lawyers to do that, or is that frowned upon?
No, you really need someone that you trust, and I would recommend that your children know that would be the appointed guardian. And I think that was just that barrier for this client that they couldn't move past. So like, well, we don't know who will look after our children. I can't imagine this happening.
So we just put it all in the too hard basket. So I guess, confronting the too hard basket, getting your, spending the time to do all of your estate planning and just going into a lawyer's office can be intimidating. So to remove the stigma of it's all too hard, I don't want to acknowledge the fact that I'm going to die or something bad could ever happen to me. So to remove that stigma and to make it easy, like 1, 2, 3, what are some things we could do as professionals to help people just get it done and move on?
I think to use yourself as an example, I think is really quite powerful. And I think it's something that I would sit there and say, well, if something happens to me, I need to make sure that my spouse and my children are going to be looked after. So this actually isn't about me. It's about them and it's about my family. And I feel like when someone thinks that you're doing something to benefit others, and especially those who are closest to you, that they will do it. I've got a very complicated will, as you could imagine. So things like testamentary trust, even as far as...
Testamentary trust, I just set up a client who might have been through you actually, that just set up a testamentary trust, and his affairs are quite complicated. Vanilla family, but big business, multiple holdings companies set up on the side. So for the people listening, just explain, we've covered the easy stuff and why people should get it done, but explain to me some of the, I guess, fun stuff you use, some complex stuff, some jargon that, we can all learn from hearing you speak.
Yeah, where do I start? Where do I finish? So there's obviously testamentary trust. So that's basically a will that's set up, a trust that's set up within your will, and it doesn't come into existence until the executor does that. And obviously it can't come into existence until the person has passed away. So a lot of people use that when they have young children. So they might say, we want to lock up their share of the inheritance until they're 21, 25, because obviously maybe receiving a lump sum amount of money at 18 might not assist your child with their life choices.
Some fun for a couple of weeks.
Maybe a lot of fun. I mean, you take that gap year. So the testamentary trust is quite common in that regard. There's a special disability trust as well. So if there's someone in your family with a disability, so we can set that up as well to make sure that they still receive the benefits from government subsidies and NDIS and things like that, because I guess it's counterproductive to not receive that assistance. So I think the biggest thing that we're seeing now in the estate planning area is the blended families.
Okay.
So,
of course.
You know, people remarrying, second, third marriages.
So then it's even more important, right, to make sure it's done?
Vital. It's just something that I practice a lot in family law as well as estates, and it's something that we always say. It's almost you separate, you must have a will, and especially do that, please, before you remarry or enter into a new relationship with people with other children as well. Yeah,
definitely. So with some clients of my own, I mean, obviously estate planning is always discussed, but whether or not it's executed is another thing. So I've heard personally some horror stories where someone's tried to do it themselves, like the old will kit from the news agency, and they've kept a copy in their safe and they've left a photo mark of a paperclip on it, and therefore it's not void. Is stuff like that actually true?
Absolutely. So the Supreme Court will requisition your probate application if there is a paperclip marking or a staple. So when we finalise your will, we actually don't staple that. We bind it. We tape it. So it's any marking if it's not signed properly. So when you have a witness sign, you're supposed to do your name, your occupation and your address. If you don't put in your occupation, you get requisitioned and it gets sent back to you. And then the lawyers have the task of, I have to then come and find the witness and then get them to swear an affidavit as to what their occupation is. So there are some really, really strict requirements.
Okay, so we have to sort of start to wrap it up now, but just something I'm interested in is, are those rules the same in every state in Australia as far as estate planning and what people need to go through to make sure they have valid wills and power of attorneys? Yeah,
so law is slightly different in each state and territory, but the general premise in relation to the validity of the will is similar throughout all jurisdictions.
Cool. All right, Melissa, well, thank you so much for coming in and explaining all that to me. It's such an important area that so many people ignore, and I feel as though we just have to engage a professional to get this part of our life done, move on, live happily ever after. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm Mark Wyld. This is Wyld Money. Thank you for joining us. See you next time.
You're watching Ticker. We'll have more in just a few minutes.